be a good idea to go ahead and start. I do need to have tea first. Okay, that's... More clicks issued from the creature's interior, this time several of them in quick succession. It mutated into a 5-pointed gray star, then split into identical stars that floated side by side in the plasma, changing color simultaneously. "It can reproduce itself," said Talon. Another half-dozen of the clicking creatures swam down the vein, joined forces with the twins, assumed the same stellar shape, divided in half, and formed up into ranks. Then they all swam on together against the current, destroying everything in their path. "We'd better get out of here," said Talon. The subcutaneous suicide squad had invaded Rala's body and promptly, ruthlessly set to work. The thanatometer falls. General TikTok was bewildered. For the first time in his life, he had done something dictated by an emotional impulse, not by willpower. He had dispatched Tychon Zyphos' subcutaneous suicide squad through the Metal Maiden circulatory system and into Rala's bloodstream. Only a single drop of it, but he knew from personal observation what havoc a single drop could wreak. How could he have lost his self-control in that way? His action was irrevocable. It was a sentence of death against which there could be no appeal. All his work, his ambitious plans, his grandiose scenario of death had been wrecked by a lapse of self-discipline. Without Rala, the Metal Maiden was just a lifeless heap of scrap. Never again would he furnish her with as noble a partner as the death-defying Wolperting. Yelling and cursing, he desperately manipulated the controls. More of this, more of that. He flooded Rala's organism with life-preserving extracts, electrified it, heated it, strove to fortify it with all the alchemical substances available to him. Then he glanced at the thanatometer. It had already fallen below 60. General TikTok bellowed nonsensically at the Metal Maiden, commanded the subcutaneous suicide squad to withdraw at once, pounded the machine with his steel fists, and left deep dents in its leaden exterior, wrenched valves and tubes out of their seatings. Alchemical extracts and acids, toxins, and gases were spurting and hissing across the laboratory, filling it with their acrid stench. Whole bunches of copper tubing were seized and hurled at the wall. General TikTok was in the process of destroying the Metal Maiden with his own hands. Suddenly, in mid-frenzy, he stopped short. He took another look at the thanatometer. The needle had fallen, was still falling. 51, 50, 49. "Who?" General TikTok demanded, looking around as if in search of a culprit. Who was Tick responsible for this? He groaned like a wounded beast convulsed with agony. He couldn't possibly watch Rala die. Her pain was transmitting itself to him and becoming his own. What had wrought this change in him? What had rendered him so vulnerable? He ventured at last a glance at the thermometer. 45, 44, 43. No, he couldn't bear it. The general tore his eyes away, wrapped himself in his cloak, and fled. Dashing out of his tower, he vanished into the gloomy alleyways of hell. Sewer hazards. By virtue of their warmth and humidity, the sewers of hell harbored the most varied flora and fauna, not only in the netherworld, but in all Zamodia. No overworld jungle or artificial habitat could rival their diversity, which extended to the microscopic domain. Fat sucker snails covered the tunnel walls in the thousands. There were breathing noises, phosphorescent mushrooms, witches' hat toadstools, dung flukes that squelched around in brackish water, poison ivy that grew as one watched, ants that shone in the dark, and dripticks that fell from the tunnel roofs like rain. Phosphorescent jellyfish had escaped from their glass vessels and fanned out in all directions, glowing in a variety of colors. Rumo was constantly engaged in riddling his fur with creatures that stung or sucked blood. "Without my helmet I wouldn't have lasted 3 days down here," said Rumo, proudly patting the funnel on his head. "I've seen people dissolve into pus after one bite from a suckerfoot spider." Yukabak had pulled his cloak over his head. "You might have mentioned that before you brought us here. Falling down the cold water cascades might almost have been preferable." "That's not a very nice way to die," Dribble told him. "They fall straight into molten lava and turn into steam. You're steamed first, then roasted, and finally asphyxiated by poisonous gases." "How much further is it to the theater?" Rumo asked. "Not very far, 2 or 3 miles. We're the prisoners' house. The Death Theater gladiators are kept in single cells," Yukabak told him. "The younger, stronger ones, that is. The prisoners that aren't considered so dangerous, mainly the older ones, are accommodated in a building right beside the theater. It's a big communal jail. That means there are 2 prisons you'll have to crack if you want to release all the Wolvertines." There was a distant rumble. A swarm of phosphorescent moths flew into the air. "What was that?" asked Yukabak. "A pipe burst," Ribble replied. "If we're lucky, our tunnel won't be swamped by it. And if we're unlucky," Ribble shrugged. "Who guards the theater of death?" Rumo asked. "Oh," said Yukabak, "only several platoons of Bloodums armed to the teeth, plus the copper killers. No one you can't handle." He laughed hysterically. "There's another way of looking at it," said Ribble. "Although there are plenty of guards, their attention will be focused on guarding the prisoners and protecting the king. They won't be expecting an attack from outside, least of all now that the copper killers have assumed overall responsibility of guarding the theater of death." "There you go again," cried Yukabak. "One Wolvertine versus a whole city. And he doesn't even know his way around there? It's utter madness." "He's right," said Ribble, looking at Rumo. "You don't stand a chance. You can still change your mind." "I'm not turning back," Rumo said quietly. "I've got a casket to deliver." "Yes," Ribble sighed, "so you already said." The dying world. The battle for Rala's body wasn't a genuine contest, but a war of conquest which the invaders had won the moment they appeared on the scene. It was a wholesale massacre, the organized mass execution of opponents incapable of self-defense. The subcutaneous suicide squad had come to conquer, not to fight. Whatever part of Rala's bloodstream she and Talon fled to, it was piled high with dead or moribund organisms. The clicking of the enemy troops was omnipresent. It even drowned Rala's heartbeat. The monstrous, misshapen viruses were patrolling everywhere, and there was scarcely a vein that hadn't been penetrated. Rala and Talon eventually decided to lie doggo among the mountains of dead and dying corpuscles. From there they watched impotently as the tireless invaders went about their grisly work. "Where else can we hide?" Rala asked, and her voice had never sounded so faint. "I don't know," said Talon. "They're everywhere, and there are more and more of them." It was long since the all-powerful intruders had encountered any resistance. They continued to reproduce themselves, dividing again and again. One virus split into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8, and so on, creating an ever-growing, irresistible army of lethal automata. Whatever organisms the members of the subcutaneous suicide squad didn't directly hunt or kill, they poisoned with clouds of acid or ripped apart with their spines and claws, boring holes in their venomous flesh. Corpuscles fell in droves, and Rala felt little more of her strength and willpower drain away with every time one sank lifeless to the ground. "This is the end," she said. "It won't matter how hard I resist or where we hide, the battle is lost. When they've killed the last little bit of me, I shall die too." "I tend to be over-optimistic, as you know," said Talon, "but this time I'm afraid I must agree with you. I've never met such destructive power." "What happens afterwards?" Rala said. Hey, Talon replied, that's a surprise. You don't want to spoil it, do you? Will we be together? Yes, we will, but that's one surprise less. I'd have liked to tell Rumo I love him. It's a bit too late for that, my girl. I can't hold out any longer, Raleigh whispered. Then let go, Talon told her. Simply let go. The place you're bound for can only be better than this one. A shower of dying corpuscles slowly descended on them, fluttering like withered leaves. A last faint tremor ran through Rala's body. A gentle sigh escaped her. Then she lay quite still. Rala? Said Talon. No reply. She didn't stir. It was time for Talon to go. He had no further business here. Soon, very soon, the world around him would dissolve. The process had already begun. Rala's body would decay cell by cell until it was reduced to dust, then her spirit would be free at last. Talon had done his utmost to delay this moment, but unfathomable forces were at work here. Rala's was unprecedented form of death, one that might have been created especially for her. No one had ever been attacked by more ruthless and powerful enemies, Talon felt sure, and never had anyone defended herself more gallantly than his Rala. Talon quit this dying world. He vanished in a way beyond the power of any door or wall or metal maiden to prevent. He went as only a disembodied spirit could have gone, already looking forward to the time when Rala would hunt comets at his side. The Snooper. There was no surprise sunrise when a new day began and held no paling moon nor dawn chorus. The city remained as dark as ever, for day and night were indistinguishable. All that marked the dividing line between them were the 12 deep bell notes that rang out across the city and made flocks of bats take wing and alarm. A Hellion day was twice as long in its day in Overworld, and the day that had just been rung in was destined to be a very special one. Riftar knew this because he had planned it down to the smallest detail. It wasn't mere chance that took the king's chief adviser past General TikTok's tower on his way to the theater of death. Riftar was worried. One of the inmates of the Rahak caves had been attacked and injured, one of the biggest, what was more. Who would be capable of such a feat, he wondered, and who could have cut off part of such a beast's trunk? Riftar had taken certain precautions. The Rahawks were being guarded round the clock, and sentries on the city gates had been reinforced. At present, however, this greatest source of concern was General TikTok. Riftar had now to pluck up enough courage to present the general with the king's demand that he fulfill his responsibilities and resume his regular attendances at the theater. He would not make it sound like an order or even a request. He would gift-wrap it nicely. He intended to convey the impression that he had personally staged today's sensational contest, which was to be the climax of the present series of bull-pitching contests, as a favor to the Copper Killer's commanding officer. Riptar's heart was none the less beating faster than usual, as it usually always did. When he had to face the general, even Gornap was more predictable than this crazy mechanical monster. Whenever they spoke, Riptar felt like a snail crawling along the edge of a razor blade. He was about to knock on the tower's copper door when he noticed that it was ajar. This was unusual. Doors were never left unlocked in a city like hell. Riptar called the general's name loudly several times. No answer. Could he be asleep? No, impossible. Machines needed no sleep. The general was obviously out. Riftar giggled nervously to himself. This was an irresistible invitation to do some snooping. He couldn't afford to pass up such an opportunity. Perhaps he would discover something which to discredit his hatred rival in the king's eyes. Pushing the door open, he went inside. He usually employed other people to perform such missions. What a thrill it was to perform one himself. He wondered what the machine's home environment would look like. TikTok's tower was dimly illuminated by a few smoking candles. The little windows being covered with thick curtains. A smell of lubricating oil and metal polish hung in the air. There were weapons, of course, swords, rapiers, sabers of all kinds, hilted blades of every size, axes, spears, daggers, scythes, halberds, throwing stars. All were lying higgledy-piggledy on tables or arrayed against the walls, nothing but weapons, tools, and mechanical odds and ends, cogwheels and screws, nuts and bolts, pliers and spanners, no chairs, no bedroom or kitchen, but any number of mirrors of every conceivable size. Naturally, such was the lifestyle of a machine that never had to eat, sleep, or sit down. When alone, it tinkered with its works or admired its own reflection. Riftar stifled a laugh. He climbed a broad flight of black marble stairs to the next floor. General TikTok, he called again, for safety's sake. Hello? No answer. In he went. Riftar found himself in the metal maiden's chamber. He held his nose. The smell had hit him was strong. What in Gordap's name was this place? A laboratory? A torture chamber? Although Riftar had expected a murderous machine's interests and predilections to be mainly of a morbid nature, He was astonished that the general should have secreted such an antiquated instrument of torture in his private quarters. It was almost endearingly old-fashioned of him. However, TikTok had obviously brought the metal maiden right up to date, technologically speaking. All those tubes and valves, how they gurgled and hissed, roared and pulsated. The apparatus had recently been used, but why had some of the tubing been destroyed? How had the doors of the machine acquired all those dents? Someone had played havoc with it. What was in all the metal hoppers? Above all, what was inside the metal maiden itself? What terrible secret was he on the track of? There was no alternative. Frithar simply had to open another two doors, the ones in front of the metal maiden. Drawing a deep breath, he swung them back as slowly and cautiously as he could, quivering with pleasurable anticipation at the possibility that something horrific would reveal itself to his gaze. The microscopic invaders. In obedience to the irrevocable laws which Tyke and Xiphus had laid down for their benefit, the soldiers of the subcutaneous suicide squad, having successfully completed the destruction of Rala's bloodstream, were proceeding to destroy the rest of her body as well. They wanted to eliminate every last cell of it before emerging into the open and seeking a new fortress of flesh and blood to conquer. They did not realize that they were imprisoned within the Iron Maiden's metal casing. However, fate ordained that her lead-sheathed doors should open wide, and standing outside was another body, another fresh, healthy organism. Having largely completed its work inside Rala, the subcutaneous suicide squad was eager to embark on a new mission. So Tyken's microscopic warriors fanned out, deserted Rala's veins, forced their way through her arterial walls, muscles, and epidermis, and emerged from her body in order to conquer Frithar. A sudden chill. The king's chief advisor had been prepared for any kind of horrific sight when he opened the metal maiden, so he was doubly surprised, indeed almost moved, to see a female Wolperting inside. Was she asleep? Was she dead? Had it not been for all those fine needles, had he himself withdrawn them from her body when opening the doors? She would have created a thoroughly peaceful impression. What a pretty creature! Why had he never seen her before? She looked as if she might have acquitted herself in the theater of death. Why had General TikTok kept her from him and the king? He felt her pulse. Yes, she was dead. Oh, he groaned suddenly. A spine-chilling sensation had assailed him. A breath of cold air from the dead Wolperting. It seemed to penetrate his every pore, infiltrate his body, and freeze his blood. He felt alternately hot and cold, dizzy and nauseous. His knees buckled and sweat broke out on his brow. He struggled for breath, his heart raced, and he had to cling to a doorpost or he would have slumped to the floor. The underside of his skin prickled, as if hundreds of ants were crawling through his veins. Oh, he groaned again. Then the sensation subsided. His strength returned and he was able to release his grip on the doorpost. He breathed deeply and mopped his brow, staring at the dead Wolperting in dismay. What had he just experienced? Did those creatures possess certain powers, even in death? Frithar dashed out of the torture chamber and ran down the stairs, then out of the tower and through the streets of hell, trying to shake off he knew not what. He didn't stop until he was outside of the theater of death. He looked up at the walls, which were faced with black skulls. Ah, the theater, the scene of which would doubtless be the most exciting fight he had ever staged. This thought reassured him. He was still feeling a trifle unwell, but the forthcoming spectacular contest would be bound to banish the last vestiges of his malaise. It was high time to begin the systematic annihilation of those unpredictable Wolpertings. A historic spot. Although Rumo and his companions were still wading through hell's slimy sewers, they had clearly left the oldest sector behind them, with its organic structures, obtrusive fauna, and curious flora. The channels here had been dug out by tunnelers. Rumo could see brickwork and plasterwork, and the authorities were clearly at pains to keep the walls free from the weeds and vermin. We're now in the civilized parts of the sewer, so to speak, immediately below the city center, Rubel explained. How much further to the theater? Asked Rumo. Only a little way, said Rubel. His voice had taken on a solemn note. We're already in the vicinity of a historic spot. What historic spot? Yuko back demanded. You've got a surprise in store, Yuko, Rubel replied. Just follow me. He plodded on ahead down a tunnel faced with red marble. It was pleasantly cool, and the water flowing along it was clear. They took the opportunity to rinse off some of the grime, then marched on. Suddenly Rubel came to a halt. This is the spot, he said in a tremulous voice. He pointed to a place on the floor immediately beneath the shaft with an iron ladder running up the side. What's so special about it? Said Yuko back. I can't see anything. That's the air shaft you fell down as a child, Yuko. This is where I found you, more dead than alive, under a pack of plague rats. They would have eaten you alive. No, cried Yuko back. Really and truly? He gave a sob. Yes, this is where our fate was decided, and now fate has brought us back here. That shaft leads you to your family mansion. Ribble turned to Rumo. You can climb up there. The shaft comes out in the grounds of Yucca mansion. There's a big black door in the wall leading to the street. Turn left, then right at the next intersection, and you'll find yourself outside the Theater of Death. You'll recognize it by the wall of black skulls that surrounds it. The prison housing most of the prisoners is just across the street. Thanks, said Rumo. You've both been of great help. He went to the foot of the ladder. Tell me something, said Ribble. You're a Wolperting on the loose. What makes you think you'll be able to roam up around there for longer than 2 minutes without causing a riot? I'll find out when the time comes. You still don't have a plan, do you? Said Yuccaback. Rumo shrugged his shoulders and proceeded to climb the ladder. He's gone, Yuccaback said after a while. Yes, said Ribble. About time, too, the lunatic. He saved your life, Ribble protested, and he kept his word. He could have taken us with him. He took us prisoner. Our people abducted his whole tribe, and they're in the process of butchering them. He'll die, Yuccaback said. So will they all. They exchanged a long, silent look. They'll probably nab him before he's gone 10 yards, Ribble said. A Wolperting running around loose? He'll stick out like a sore thumb. And all for the sake of a casket. Yes, romantic nonsense. Well, we did what we could. Yes, we did. You had to end somewhere. Yes, here, at this romantic spot, said Ribble, where one great friendship began and another ended. They both gave a sob. If we'd gone with him, we could have pretended he was our prisoner, Ribble went on. We could have escorted him safely to the theater. With us, he'd have found it's child's play to get into the prison. A piece of cake. They fell silent again. Think he's reached the top by now? Asked Yuccaback. I'm sure he has, Ribble replied. We'd better be quick then. They both scrambled up the shaft. Rumo, they called in unison. Wait for us, we're coming with you. The Theater of Death. Hell, a city without a sky, without clouds or stars, a colorless, sunless city filled with unpleasant smells. Even its architecture made Rumo feel uneasy. Nothing but squat, humpbacked, horned, scaly, menacing shapes. House fronts like hideous faces, doors like gaping mouths, windows like empty eye sockets, everything gray and black. Grimy, tattered garments dangled from lines suspended between the buildings like the corpses of hanged men. Hollowed-out rawhawk carapaces, weirdly illuminated from within, served as living accommodation. Here and there volcanic fumes belched from yawning holes in the ground. What a hideous place, Rumo whispered. Is this really where you live? It's where we used to live, Yuccaback replied. We'd actually succeeded in escaping from this hellhole, but then we ran into someone called Rumo, and now we're on our way to perdition, because we've left the rest of our wits in the sewers. I didn't force you to come with me. No, but a little thank you wouldn't come amiss. Rumo and his companions were pretending to be a prisoner plus escorts. The Wolperting led the way while Yuccaback, who had borrowed his sword, urged him on, and Ribble, marching along like a soldier, brought up the rear. Their first objective was the jail beside the Theater of Death. According to Yuccaback, it wasn't too heavily guarded. The streets are remarkably empty, said Ribble. The theater is probably staging a spectacular fight of some kind. They marched past a row of houses whose numerous windows, dimly illuminated by black candles, displayed sets of false teeth of every conceivable size. Whenever people came their way, Yuccaback and Ribble strove to make an exceptionally martial impression, and Yuccaback prodded Rumo in the back with his sword. Keep going, prisoner, he barked. No false moves. Don't overdo it, Rumo hissed. That sword is sharp. Shut up, you miserable scum of Wolperting, Yuccaback growled. Shh, said Ribble. We're there. That's the prison. Rumo, who was holding his paws together behind his back, as if handcuffed, inspected the big black building. Grim and unadorned, it had no windows and only one entrance, an ideal prison. How many guards? That depends, Ribble whispered. Sometimes just 2, sometimes a dozen. They only have one door to guard, after all. It also depends on how many men they need at the theater. The prisoners in here are old and feeble, so they don't pay them much attention, shall I? Rumo nodded. Ribble knocked on the door. Who is it? Growled a deep voice. Zugo and Yog. Blibbering Kukoback of Friftar's secret police, Ribble called. We've captured a stray Wolperting who's probably escaped from here. No one escaped from here, said another deep voice. No one ever does. Don't you want to give him the once-over at least? No. Ribble thought for a moment. Your names? Zugo and Yog are the prison guard. Why do you want to know? Yukovak held up 2 fingers. Only 2 guards. Rumo nodded again. So that I can report you to Friftar, said Ribble. You'll be charged with failing to assist the secret police. The door opened a crack. Standing inside were 2 heavily armed Bloodums. That's a young Wolperting, said one of them. He must have escaped from the theater, said the other. We only have the oldsters in there. May we come in? Asked Yukovak. We need some proper chains. This is only a makeshift job, and he's a dangerous brute. The Bloodums opened the door, grumbling, and Yukovak and Ribble pushed Rumo inside. By the time they followed into the dimly lit guardroom, Zugo and Yog were lying senseless on the floor. You are quick, said Yukovak. No, said Rumo. Bloodums are slow. He surveyed the room. A wooden table, 3 chairs, a rack of weapons, massive double doors, bolted. The prisoners are in there, said Yukovak, your friends. When Rumo unbolted the doors and flung them open, he was met by a pleasant and familiar smell for the first time since setting foot in Netherworld. It was the scent of Wolpertings, lots of them. Under escort. For days now, the door of Urza's cell had been opened only so that some bread could be tossed in or his pitcher of water refilled. Today was different. Behind the warders stood a whole squad of copper killers ready to escort him into the arena. As is the case with his previous fights, he was conducted into one of the anterooms and allowed to choose a weapon. Having decided on a handy broadsword with a double-edged blade, Urs waited for the gate to open and admit him to the arena, where 6 heavily armed soldiers or a ravenous troglodyte could probably be waiting for him. Ever since his fight with Ebel the Octopus, Urs had felt that his talent for swordsmanship imposed an obligation on him. Every opponent he dispatched was one less potential killer of Wolpertings. That was his cruel logic. This time, however, instead of being sent into the arena to fight as soon as he'd chosen his weapon, Urs was made to wait. He waited for hours, so it seemed, while the din from the arena and the auditorium drifted in, the clatter of the swords, the roaring of the wild beasts. The spectators' applause. There seemed to be considerably more supporting bouts than usual, and he kept hearing Friftar's nasal voice delivering long-winded speeches during the intermissions. Urs grew more and more uneasy. He sensed that the theater of death had something very special in store for him. The reunion. When Rumo saw the prisoners in the big hall, he had a strange feeling of déjà vu. He was reminded of the moment on Rooming Rock when he entered the Demonical's larder, drenched with blood, to release the captive Hakonians. Once again he was greeted like a ghost, and once again no one spoke at first. The hall was huge and only sparsely illuminated by jellyfish torches. Most of the prisoners were sitting on the floor, but some were standing together in little groups. There was no furniture, just blankets and paillasses. Rumo recognized many faces in the dim light, teachers from school and craftsmen of his acquaintance, most of them elderly Wolpertings, but also a few Zemonians of other breeds. Olga of Dulsgaard was sitting on a straw mattress, staring at him in disbelief. Rumo, she said, her face was lost all stern authority. Rumo spotted the mayor, Jolly of Gloomberg, who was sitting with his back against a wall, gazing at him as incredulously as the others. Rumo, he said, why have they put you in here? Is something wrong with you? Are you ill? Wounded? Rumo knelt down in front of him. Nobody sent me. I came to release you. The mayor pricked up his ears. But weren't you taken as prisoner? I was in Nern Forest when they raided Wolperting. The city was deserted when I returned. There was a big hole in the ground where the Black Dome used to stand. I followed you down here. Have you any idea what this place is? The mayor asked. Where we are? This is Hell, the capital of Netherworld, Rumo told him. They drugged you and brought you here. Do you know where Rala is? Not here, anyway. What do you plan to do? I think it would be best if I freed the other Wolpertings first. They're held prisoner in a place known as the Theater of Death. I'll come back with them, and we'll all fight our way out of the city together. I like your plan, said the mayor. Perhaps that's what you're best at, making plans. No, said Rumo, it certainly isn't, but listen, I've got 2 allies who grew up in this city. One of them I'll take to the theater, and the other will remain outside for your protection, and pretend to be guarding you. Keep quiet until we return. I'll see to it, said Jowly. Good, informed the others. Rumo rose, and the mayor proceeded to spread the promising news. Rumo was just leaving when a low voice stopped him in his tracks. Rumo, is that you? It asked from the shadows. He had to screw up his eyes to make out 2 figures seated against the wall. One was exceptionally big and bulky, the other exceptionally small and puny. Is Rumo here? Asked the puny little figure, opening its eyes. They were big and round and shone in the dark like 2 moons. Incredulously, Rumo took a step nearer. Bolston, Smike, and Professor Calibri were sitting in there. Rolf alarms himself. Rolf had gathered, if only from the demeanor of the soldiers who fetched him from his cell, that he was in for something out of the ordinary. They treated him with the utmost caution, indeed with respect. It was partly because of his prowess in the theater. Rolf was known as the crazy artist of death, who could be in several places at once. His strategy was unchanged. He would try to take the insane little king hostage and exchange him for the release of Rala and the other Wolpertines. It simply meant that he had to be faster than the copper killer's crossbow bolts. Having been conducted to the table with weapons on it, he put on 3 belts instead of 1. Once he buckled around his waist, the other 2 round his shoulders. Then he loaded them with 2 swords, 6 knives, and 4 spiked metal throwing discs. A small axe completed his arsenal. This being the day he had longed for most and dreaded most, he wanted at least to be adequately equipped for it. For Mercombe to hell. After Smike had finished reading Professor Ostafon Calibri's lighthouse log, the Mercomers captured him in a most bizarre manner. At first they merely formed a silent, motionless circle around the lighthouse, and Smike simply remained inside. Suddenly, however, the Mercombe Trombophone Orchestra struck up. Its weird music caused the dense, dark fog enclosing the lighthouse to swirl round so violently that it pressed up against the big picture window, and made it bulge inwards in an ominous way. At this, Smike lost his nerve and surrendered. The Mercomers then escorted him, still in silence, to a building where, for several days, he was imprisoned in one room with the Professor Ostafon Calibri, who made a mentally deranged impression in 7 other captives, all of them Midgardian dwarfs. The dwarfs were also in a state of temporary dementia as a result of being gradually poisoned for weeks by the fog. They believed themselves to be considerably more numerous than they actually were, and it wasn't long before Smike felt he was locked up, not just with 7 of them, but with several dozen. Then one day the door of their prison opened, escorted by a dozen brutal-looking bloodhounds, among whom Smike was surprised to see Cromek Tuma, Zorda, and Zorilla from the Glassman Tavern. They were conducted through dense fog to a cave beside the sea. From there, by way of a labyrinthine system of stalactite caves, they descended deeper to the ground, and eventually, after a long and arduous march, reached hell. They were attacked 3 times en route by huge predatory insects, resembling a cross between a spider and a moth, and 3 of the bloodhounds lost their lives. Once in hell, Calibri and Smike were classified as second-class prisoners and inside the prison near the theater. The professor had regained his sanity, so they were at last able to resume their scholarly conversations, though not in the conditions they would have preferred. Then, not long ago, the prison filled up the Wolpertines. Smike had questioned them about Rumo, but in vain. They all knew of him, but had no idea of his whereabouts. Now Rumo had re-entered Smike's life in much the same way as he had stumbled into the cave on Roaming Rock while still an inexperienced youngster. Many questions, one riddle. Smike? Rumo exclaimed in amazement. Who else? Smike replied, baring his shark's teeth and grin. You, Rumo, me, Smike. Hello, Rumo, said Calibri. Hello, Professor, said Rumo. I see the 2 of you have met up again. It's a very long story, Smike said. I'll save it for later. How did you get to Netherworld, my boy? What brings you here? I've come to rescue my fellow Wolpertines. Calibri's eyes glowed. You mean you aren't a prisoner? He asked. And you managed to get here all the way across Netherworld and hell? Said Smike. His grin widened. Your presence fills an old friend's heart with hope. Roaming Rock was a different kettle of fish, Rumo reminded him. That was just an island teeming with monsters. This time it's a whole city. Smike raised his several index fingers. One grows into one's work, he said. Do you have a plan? Asked Calibri. Not really, Rumo confessed. Then you come to the right people, said Smike. We've got 5 brains between us. I have to go to a building called the Theater of Death, Rumo said. That's where the other Wolpertines are held prisoner. Will you come with me? I will, said Smike. Professor? A little exercise would do me good. All right, said Rumo, let's go. One more thing, Smike gripped Rumo with one of his little arms. Did you discover the answer to my riddle? What grows shorter and shorter the longer it gets? Oh, Rumo replied, that was easy. The answer, of course, is life. Smike grinned. Of course, he said. Ushan feels rejuvenated. Ushan DeLuca had never been in better shape. Even as the soldiers escorted him down the stairs, he knew that his feats of arms in the arena would far surpass any he had been able to perform there on previous occasions. There was no weather in Netherworld, and the intoxicating sensation this induced in him was growing stronger every day. Down here, he was spared all the meteorological conditions that had made him so tired and torpid, weak and depressed and on the surface. Down here, he was experiencing a resurgence of the physical strength he had last possessed in his youth. They escorted him into the anteroom, where he went over to the table with the weapons laid out on it. Pandemonium reigned in the auditorium. Ushan could hear the roaring of wild beasts, the despairing cries of prisoners. He could smell fresh blood and the cold sweat of fear, but there was nothing out there capable of filling him with the dread. He was Ushan DeLuca, and he was in the best of spirits. He scanned the table. Choosing a weapon was no problem. He would naturally take a sword, the first one that came into hand. As long as the blade was good and sharp, he picked one up and slashed the air with it. He went. The diamond-tipped pliers. General Tick-Tock was roaming the streets of hell. The roadway shattered under his ponderous tread, and all who encountered him leapt aside in terror. What was his pain inside of him? Nonsense, he was incapable of feeling pain. He had no nervous system, he was a machine. But in that case, why was he in such agony? What was this thought that obsessed him? The thought of Rolla's death? He realized that hidden within him, in the depths of his body, was its bristling array of weapons, was something capable of suffering. Never had he felt that more clearly than he did now. At last he came to a halt. This was the street. This was the house. It was the weaponsmith's house, where he had found the Metal Maiden, the accursed Metal Maiden, which had once more become a worthless accumulation of junk. She was nothing without the soul that Rolla had given her. He knocked on the door, which he had ordered to be sealed. The workshop looked just as he had left it. The weaponsmith, now a skeleton, was still lying on the floor. General Tick-Tock had come in search of something. He was after the huge, dangerous-looking pliers with the diamond-tipped teeth, which looked as if they could have torn a copper killer apart. Where were the confounded things? He overturned workbenches and shoveled scrap metal aside, sending screws and iron components flying through the air. There were the pliers. He weighed them in his hand. Yes, they were powerful pliers with the ingenious hydraulic mechanism and sparkling teeth tipped with diamonds of the first water. General Tick-Tock applied them to his ribcage. Surely they would help him to discover the accursed thing that was causing him so much pain deep inside. The silver thread. Rumo, Smike, and Calibri had agreed that Ribble should stay behind with the elderly Wolpertines, pretended to be guarding them and keep the outer door locked. Zugo and Yog were bound, gagged, and carried into the main hall, where they were covered with straw. Smike, Calibri, and Yukabak would accompany Rumo to the theater of death and release the other Wolpertines. Yukabak's intimate knowledge of the building would enable them to enter it unobserved. But their plan was shelved as soon as they left the prison. Before setting off for their theater, Rumo sniffed the air again, and the scene that unfolded in his mind's eye was just as dismal and dismaying as his dark, grimy surroundings, which held the scent of many other Wolpertines. That scent led in the direction of the theater. But he could also see the silver thread. His heart gave a leap. Yes, it was really here in the midst of hell. Slender but radiant, it floated above the infernal stench. Rolla was here, quite close at hand. We must go that way, said Rumo. But the theater is in the opposite direction, Yukabak protested. I know, but I picked up Rolla's scent. Really? Huh? Said Smike. And who, pray, is Rolla? Tick-Tock's tower. While they were following Rolla's scent, Rumo tried to explain who she was. He told Smike about Wolpertine, Nerd Forest, and the casket, getting everything back to front, of course. In other words, said Smike, summarizing Rumo's incoherent recital, you're besotted with her. Most interesting, said Calibri. A silver thread, visible smells and emotions, eh? It reminds me of one of my experiments with the otoscope. Ostoscope. Wolpertine's sense of smell has yet to be fully researched. Meanwhile, Yukovak was doing his best to make them look like a motley bunch of prisoners under escort and hoping not to bump into any soldiers. Even so, the combination of Wolpertine, a sharp grub, a nocturne math, and a helling was bound to attract the attention of anyone who passed such a strangely assorted group. Move it, cried Yukovak, brandishing Rumo's sword. Move it, you miserable bunch of slaves. At last Rumo paused outside a dark tower. Rallis in there, he said. Yukovak flinched. What, in there? Of all places? That's General TikTok's tower. You mean General TikTok is here in hell? Asked Smike. Yes, he commands the Copper Killers. They guard the prisoners in the theater. In that case, said Smike, it's curtains. I'm going in, said Rumo. Rallis in there. What if General TikTok's at home? Asked Yukovak. Then I'll kill him. Give me my sword. Oh, sure, Yukovak said with a sigh. Of course you'll kill him. No problem. The three. Although convinced that what awaited him there would be unpleasant, Urs felt relieved when he was finally permitted to enter the arena. The auditorium was packed. Griftar, standing beside the balustrade of the royal box, cried, The Theatre of Death presents Urs of the Snows. Urs was greeted with thunderous applause. He wondered what it would be this time, soldiers, wild beasts both at once, or something even more formidable. Another gate opened, and Ushan de Luca sauntered into the arena. His sword flickered through the air. Tss, 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 went Ushan. The Theatre of Death presents Ushan de Luca, cried Griftar. The applause swelled. Urs was impressed. Another Wolpertine? He hadn't been expecting that. A third gate opened, and Rolv strode in. The Theatre of Death presents Rolv of the Forest. The spectators rose, yelling delightedly and stamping their feet. Urs was puzzled. Ushan and Rolv? Were the three of them going to fight as a team? Urs bellowed the audience. The Wolpertines stood in the middle of the arena with flowers and garlands raining down on them. Griftar raised his arm, and the applause died away. In case you aren't familiar with the rules of it, he called to the prisoners below, allow me to acquaint you with them. Ushan, Rolv, and Urs glanced at each other in surprise. Main essential, cried Griftar, is that two of the participants end up dead, not just one. The stupidest fighter always dies first. He's the one with the most qualms about killing one of the others in league with the third. Once he has been dispatched, the two survivors fight to the death. We won't fight each other, Urs shouted up at the box. Gornav joined Griftar at the balustrade. Tell them, he hissed. Tell them wath to ekpext if they peruse. Oh yes, Griftar called. I almost forgot. If you refuse to fight each other, we shall march your elderly compatriots into the arena one by one to act as targets for the Copper Killers, until you change your mind, and believe me, change it you will. Let the commence. The audience chanted again. Ushan made his blade whistle through the air. Psst, psst, psst. He went, Shall I tell you what I like best down here? Urs and Rolf stared at him. The weather, that's what. There isn't any weather down here, said Urs. Exactly, Ushan smiled. I know you couldn't care less, but you've no idea how much it means to me. Down here I feel as if I possess supernatural powers. Psst, psst, psst. What precisely are you getting at? Urs demanded. He wants us to team up against him, said Rolf. He wants to play the hero. I'm not fighting any Wolpertine, said Urs. We'll have to fight whether we like it or not, said Rolf. They'll kill our people otherwise. Then kill me first, said Urs, and fight it out between you. Rolf groaned. Another hero. Psst, 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 went Ushan. For those who are a trifle slow on the uptake, I'll say it again. I taught you youngsters the tricks of the trade, but down here I'm worth two of you. Your only hope is to join forces against me. Besides, it's the only way of gaining time. Gaining time for what? Asked Urs. No idea, said Ushan. A miracle, perhaps. Agreed, said Rolf. I can use some time. I plan to nab that crazy king of theirs. In that case, Ushan said with a smile, let's combine business with pleasure. A prophecy fulfilled. The copper-sheathed door of the black tower was open, and Rumo had entered without hesitation. This was a warrior's home, no doubt about it. There were stacks of weapons all over the place, swords, axes, blades of every description. The big mirrors standing among them reminded Rumo of Ushan DeLuca's fencing garden. Yay! You go back, said in a whisper. I don't think we ought to snoop around in General TikTok's private quarters. It could mean a death sentence. There's nobody here, said Smike. Rumo took the stairs 3 at a time. On the floor above he found another door ajar. Raising his sword, he kicked it open. Anything up there? Smike called from below. As Rumo entered the chamber containing the metal maiden, it all came back to him. Within a single instant, past, present, and future, prophecy and fulfillment became fused into one. The annual fair, the gloomy star tent, the professor with several brains, the chest of drawers oracle. There it was, the sight that Rumo had seen in the open drawer, the sight that had once been the future, but was now a terrible reality. He saw Rolla's lifeless body lying in a coffin. Rolla was dead. Rumo felt faint. He dropped his sword and slumped to the floor. Then he passed he could. A moment. The stream just flashed, which was very strange. I'm going to be right back. I don't know what would cause that. I am 33, just in case there's some sort of strange, weird issue again. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, hopefully that solved the problem. It was ages since he'd held a weapon in his hand. Hastily he grabbed a spear. Someone rapped on the outer door. Who is it? Ribble called as smartly as he could. Orderly officer, barked a voice. Open up. No can do, Ribble replied. Why not? Quarantine. An epidemic has broken out among the Wolpertines. I'm not here to inspect the Wolpertines, only the guard. Hell, muttered Ribble. What did you say? Nothing. So open up, or do I have to fetch reinforcements? Ribble opened the door. The orderly officer was a Bloodham. He came in, looked around, and skeptical manner and stationed himself in front of Ribble, whom he topped by several heads. Zugo and Yog are supposed to be on guard duty. Where are they? He snapped. Off sick, sir, barked Ribble. Sick? What, both of them? Asked Bloodham. I saw them only this morning. They were fit as fiddles. They're under observation, said Ribble. It's this epidemic. The Bloodham took a step backwards. Is it catching? Very. The Bloodham eyed Ribble suspiciously. What are you doing on guard duty, anyway? I've never seen a homunculus here before. I'm the first homunculus in the guard detachment. It was an idea of Frithgar's. Ribble saluted. So why aren't you in uniform? What's the outfit you're wearing? I had to surrender my uniform for disinfection. The epidemic, you know. Why are you on your own here? 2 sentries are the regulation number. My comrade has gone off for a pee, sir. Peeing on duty is against regulations. Yes, sir, I know the regulations. Really? Then I'm sure you also know the regulation that says carrying a crossbow is obligatory while on guard duty. Spears are prohibited. Yes, I know, but all the crossbows are needed at the theater. Oh, so you know it, do you? That's odd, because no such regulation exists. Who exactly are you? The Bloodham reached for a sword. Ribble's spear shot out and caught him in the throat. The Bloodham's knees buckled. With a gurgle, he clashed to the floor and lay inert at Ribble's feet. Yes, Ribble asked himself, who exactly am I? A servant? A citizen of hell? No, no longer. Then it came to him. He gave the Bloodham's corpse a kick. You wanted to know who I am? He said. I'm a rebel. For Ralla's sake alone. Rumo regained consciousness to find Smike, Yucabak, and Calibri bending over him. He was lying on a table on the ground floor of the tower. He tried to sit up, but he was too weak. Lie there for a moment, Rumo, said the professor. You'll soon feel better. Where's Ralla? Still upstairs. Is that Ralla you were talking about? Asked Smike. Yes, said Rumo. What happened to her? Someone killed her, said Yucabak. That's what more. They must have tortured her first. It can only have been General TikTok. No one else sets foot in this tower. She can't be dead, Rumo said. I can see the silver thread. It can still detect her scent. At the risk of sounding irreverent, Calibri said gently, the dead have a scent too. It doesn't disappear until they turn to dust. I must go to her, said Rumo. He rose with an effort and made for the stairs. Spare yourself, my boy, said Smike. Rumo climbed the stairs. He knelt beside Ralla's leaden coffin and wept, and the prophecy was fulfilled at last. He remained kneeling there for a long time just as he had seen himself, kneeling in Professor Nightingale's tent. When he rose to his feet again, he made a resolution. Everything he did from now on, he would do for Ralla's sake alone. 2 against 1. Down here, thought Urs, Ushan DeLuca was truly worth 2 of him and Rolf, if not 3 or 4. He whirled across the arena with them, as if this were a dancing lesson, and the fencing master was definitely in charge. I'll be right back. Okay. I'm going to be reading kind of like off the side for a little bit because my back is hurting me. 2 against 1. Down here, thought Urs. Ushan DeLuca was truly worth 2 of him and Rolf, if not 3 or 4. He whirled across the arena with them as if this were a dancing lesson, and the fencing master was definitely in charge. Urs had never seen Ushan so light-footed, so good-humored, and full of ideas. What a pity he was wasting his talent on a fight with members of his own kind. "Tss, cried Ushan. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as venomous as a scorpion. I'm as quick as a dragonfly. The trio had begun performing some innocuous feints and parries to create the illusion of a genuine fight, but the knowledgeable spectators had soon caught on and started to boo. Is that the best you can do, boys? Cried Ushan. This isn't a fencing lesson. We can't just go through the motions. If you don't try harder, those bottoms will soon be using our pupil for target practice. Attack me in earnest. Try to kill me. I can't do it, Urs called back. You aren't that good, said Rolf. I could wound you. No, Rolf, you couldn't, Ushan retorted. No one could. You could try your utmost to kill me, and you wouldn't even scratch me. Try it. Come on, attack me. He whirled around them. Take that, and that, and that, he cried, showering them with blows. Urs and Rolf felt slight pricks all over their bodies as if they had run into a swarm of bees. I could have killed you 5 times over, each of you. Come on, we've got to fight. Not for our own lives, but for others. Enough of this fooling around. Try to kill me. You won't do it anyway, you amateurs. If I try to kill someone, I kill him, said Rolf. Ushan halted and lowered his blade. You still don't get it, do you? I'm invincible. Must I teach you a lesson? He remained motionless as Rolf and Urs circled him. You aren't in your fencing garden now, Ushan. Urs lowered his voice. I'm not one of your backward pupils. Yes, Rolf said. Don't bite off more than you can chew, old stager, said was Ushan's only response. Rolf and Urs doubled up in pain and clutched their noses because each of them had sustained a cut on his most sensitive organ. The spectators roared with laughter. There, said Ushan to Luca. Now will you attack me? Now are you prepared to kill me? Strategic plans. General TikTok's tower was now the fugitives' temporary headquarters. Rumo, who had recovered his composure and gone downstairs again, calmly conferred with the others on what to do next. It was quickly agreed that the puny little Doc Turnimath was the overweight shark grub would be little use in a fight. Colibri and Smite were to remain with Vala's corpse and guard it because Rumo insisted on taking it back to Wolverton once he had freed the others. Meanwhile, Yukovac would accompany him to the Theater of Death. Just do what you did on Roaming Rock, Smite told him. I'll try, Rumo replied. The Theater of Death. The Theater of Death was the black heart of hell, the octagon whose 8 colossal walls were faced with skulls stained black by the eternal soot. The skulls all belonged to enemies of the Gornat dynasty, Yukovac explained, looking around anxiously as they stole along. The theater has many entrances. As a member of the Hellion nobility, I often get a chance to see what goes on behind the scenes. I know how the theater's devilish machinery works. We'd better use one of the cellar entrances. That's when they deliver the meat to the wild animals. They're unguarded because everyone is scared of the beasts. From there one can get anywhere, including the back stairs that lead to the prisoners' cells. One thing's for sure, no one has ever been crazy enough to want to sneak in that way, only out. If at all. Yukovac gave a nervous laugh. Laughter, applause, and savage yells were issuing from the theater. An exciting contest was obviously in progress. Tell me something, said Yukovac. What was it you did on this Roaming Rock? I killed as many enemies as I could, Rumo replied. I see, said Yukovac. So you don't have a plan after all. Getting in was easy. They climbed in through an unbarred window at the rear of the theater. The cellar in which they found themselves was full of gnawed bones, and the stuffy air was thick with plump, buzzing blue bottles. The muffled roars of a wild animal were coming from somewhere nearby. Yukovac opened the inner door, which gave on to a dark passage flanked by another dozen doors. Yukovac tried one of them, only to be confronted by a 6-foot spider with ruby-red fur, 8 yellow eyes the size of dinner plates, and marbled gray wings like a moth. The spider turned its attention to the two intruders and fluttered its wings. Nickelback slammed the door and hurried. Sorry, he said, wrong one. The next three doors he opened only a crack and promptly shut again, having been greeted respectively by an awe-inspiring roar, an infernal stench, and a writhing tentacle. At last he found the right door. The stairs, he whispered. From here we can get to the prison cells. They climbed the stairs, accompanied by the spectators' ever-swelling, ever-fading shouts and applause. Rumo detected many unpleasant smells, among them blood, sweat, and fear, the scent of death as a perverted form of entertainment. At the top of the stairs they found themselves looking down a passage dimly illuminated by a few torches. Rumo was astonished by the sight that met his eyes. At the end of the passage was a black wooden door, with a heavy table in front of it, and dozing at the table, which bore several empty wine bottles, were its three guards. They were Bloodums, and they were snoring softly. But the most astonishing aspect of the scene was not the soldiers' dereliction of duty, but the fact that Rumo knew all three. They were Zorda, Zorilla, and Kromek Tuma, the Bloodums from the Glassman Tavern. Kromek, Tuma, Zorda, and Zorilla. After Rumo and Smike had left them barking madly in his taproom at the Glassman, Kromek Tuma had undergone a surprising transformation. He had bettered himself professionally, acquired a set of firm friends, and found his true home. Best of all, he had never barked since. Kromek had recovered from his fit of demento just in time to catch Zorda and Zorilla in the act of showing his possessions and sacks with a view of making off with them. He won the terrible fight that followed because the other two were still groggy after their encounter with Smike and Rumo. While waiting for Zorda and Zorilla to recover their senses, Kromek debated whether the innkeeper's trade was really up the street. He detested waiting on people. He hadn't made a bean, and whenever he awoke from one of his fits, he found people busy robbing him. His life had gone wrong somewhere. Listen, Kromek Tuma, said a familiar voice in his head. I don't think you're cut out to be an innkeeper, was the voice of the last man who had commanded him to build the tavern in the first place. But you told me, I know I was wrong, I admit, but I'm a mental illness. You can't hold me responsible, can't I? No, I wasn't in my right mind, but this time I see it all clearly. My mind is clear, crystal clear. Clear as a diamond composed of pure thought subjected to extreme pressure. Do you know how clear that is? No, said Kromek. It's insanely clear, my friend. Listen, you should take up your old profession again. In my opinion, the mercenary's trade is the only one that suits you. I don't know, it won't be easy to land another job in the mercenary army. I marched around Prince Hussein Banana's head on the end of a spear. People get to fear that sort of thing. Generals don't care for it. I know, but I'm not talking about any army up here. Ever heard of Netherworld? Sure, there's some nut blathering about it every campfire, but what would you say if I told you the Netherworld really exists? I'd say you were nuts. And you'd be absolutely right, seeing as how I'm a mental illness, but my information about Netherworld's existence comes from a crystal clear source, as clear as what source? Another mental illness. You mean you screwballs can communicate? Of course we can. We're in touch with each other, telepathically touch voices, all of us are voices that... Yes, said Kromek, clutching his brow. Spare me the details, I'm getting a headache. My information about Netherworld comes from someone by the name of Hornax, said the Glassman. You've got names? Of course, I'm the Glassman. Then there's Hornab, and the Howling Hound, and Stroba the Screamer, and 12-Tongued Tadpole, and... All right, so there's an army down in Netherworld? Oh, what an army! They only take the scum of the earth, and anyone who lacks even that qualification becomes a general. How does one get there? There are many routes to Netherworld. I recommend the one that goes via Merkholm. Why? Because it's the craziest, the Glassman gave a diabolical laugh. The route to Netherworld. When Zorda and Zorilla regained consciousness, Kromek made it clear that the next time they tried to rob him, he would dice them, pickle them, and take them along as iron rations for an emergency. Realizing that he was in earnest, they swore to turn over a new leaf. The three of them later became best friends because, however stupid, brutal, and underhanded they might be, Bloodums seldom bore a grudge. Kromek told the other two about his plan to go to Netherworld, and Zorda and Zorilla, who thought it sounded a place after their own hearts, decided to join him. They burned down the Glassman Tavern and set off, guided by the voice of Kromek's head. When they got to Merkholm, its sinister inhabitants admitted them to the Friends of Hell Association and initiated them into Merkholm's secret function as an urban flytrap. Their first task as members of the secret society was to escort a new batch of prisoners to Hell, accompanied by a few other Bloodums who knew their way to Netherworld. To Gromet's, Zorda's, and Zorella's satisfaction, one of these prisoners was the fat shark rat, who had been giving them such a hard time with the Wolverton's assistance. Gromet interpreted this as an omen that he was on the right track. The Bloodums made their way down into Netherworld through a precipitous maze of tunnels. They were immediately taken with the place. Although it harbored many unpleasant creatures, including huge spiders with moth-like wings, they could be quite a nuisance and devoured 3 of their comrades. The sinister aura of hell instantly appealed to them, so they delivered their prisoners and joined the army of Hornab the 99th. No one here held it against Cromac that they had carried his general's head around on his spear. This time the voice in his head seemed to have given him the right advice. Cromac, Zorda, and Zorilla served in several units of the Netherworld army before being assigned to the theater of death, where they took part in 1 or 2 fights that required them to smash the skulls of some defenseless dwarfs. Then, as luck would have it, they landed the coveted restful job of guarding the prisoner's fleet. Cromac had for the first time felt a renewed pang of uneasiness when the captive Wolvertines were brought to Hell. Although he was somewhat reassured to find that they did not include the Wolvertines of the Glassman Tavern, the presence of those creatures got on his nerves. The fights he witnessed in the arena revived unpleasant memories. Lately they had even suffered from nightmares in which the Wolvertines pursued him with bare fangs until he woke up yelling his head off. He started to drink again. On the day when the great freezing took place in the arena, he had drained 3 bottles of extremely potent Netherworld wine and fallen into a deep sleep in which he dreamt that he was being chased by a big white dog that bore a horrific resemblance to the brute from the Glassman Tavern. Rumo stole up the table, and the 3 snoring guards, cautiously followed by Yukovak. He drew his sword. "Are you going to fight?" asked Cradle. "As little as possible," Rumo replied. Cradle uttered a groan of disappointment. "What are you going to do?" asked Dandelion. Rumo bit out a rap loudly on the table 3 times. Cromac, Tumo, Zorda, and Zorilla woke up and stared at him clearly. "Hello, Cromac," said Rumo. "Long time no see." He stunned Zorilla with the flat of his sword. Zorda he spared them so that he could help him release the prisoners. As for Cromac Tumac, he had started to bark again. Smite takes a gamble. Smite gazed mournfully at Vala's face as she lay there in her metal coffin. What a noble, beautiful creature, he thought. What an ideal mate for Rumo she would have made. "What would you say," Professor Calibri asked casually, as if inviting Smite to play chess with him, "to helping me to get the better of death?" "What?" Smite said dully. "I was wondering if you'd care to join me in a little scientific venture, one in which you would combat death and work on your own immortality at the same time." The professor gave him an encouraging smile. "If you feel obliged to relieve the tension by cracking morbid jokes, it must be your nocturnomanthic sense of humor. Forgive me if I don't laugh. I'm not joking. I'm making you a serious offer, the way I did back there in the forest. You want me to re-enter your brain? That would be the first step. Our ultimate destination as well as heart. How would we get there? It certainly won't be easy. Someone has really played havoc with your system. It won't be without its dangers either, because that applies to all pioneering ventures. The odds are 50-50. It's a gamble, you mean? Yes, a gamble, and for me a unique opportunity to check my calculations. In that case, Professor, explain the rules. You already know the first step. You pay me a brain visit. You pay my brain a visit. You make your way into the chamber containing the non-existent Teeny's micro-machines and get aboard the subcutaneous submarine. Then you travel in it from my bloodstream into Ralla's. Once there, you use the non-existent Teeny's instruments to start her heart beating again. That's all. That's all, Smike laughed. Nothing more? How do I get from your body to Ralla's? That's the easiest part. I shall lay a pipeline between our 2 bloodstreams. This place is an ideal laboratory. All I need is some sterile tubing. Smike stared hard at Calibri. He seemed to be genuinely in earnest. I've got umpteen questions, Professor. How dangerous will it be? Do we have the slightest chance of success? How will I find my bearings inside Ralla's body? That's only 3 questions, and the answer is the same in each case. Everything will turn out all right. Yes, according to my calculations, it's all right. It'll all work out somehow. Somehow? And you call yourself a scientist? It may sound a trifle vague, but you know from experience how reliable my calculations are. What if somebody turns up while what if General TikTok comes home? Then we're done for in any case. You think it'll really work? Wouldn't it be a wonderful surprise for Rumo? I owe him a debt of gratitude, and I'd like to repay him. He saved my life, after all. How many lives do you owe him, Smike? 1, 2? Smike gave the metal maiden a lingering stare. So far, he growled 3. May I stick my finger in your ear? Do my guess, Professor Fleet said with a smile. A brilliant idea. Gornap jumped around excitedly on his throne and punched the cushions. Now they're Typhing Prollery, he panted, with a magnificent spectacle. Quite so, your majesty, said Frithar. They're fighting properly at last, to the death. The 3 Wolvertines down in the arena had only played around at first as expected, but their onslaughts were now becoming faster and more ferocious. The younger 2 had clearly joined forces against the older one, but the latter was repelling their attacks with a masterful ease that belied his unimpressive exterior. The sight of the Wolvertines fighting amongst themselves had a novel and very special appeal that held the whole audience spellbound, just as Frithar had foreseen. For the very first time in this arena, a contest of the highest quality was in progress. There was no fight between barbarians and uncouth mercenaries. These 3 genuine artists were at work. However, Frithar added, I believe we can enhance the proceedings still further. We need only throw a few more logs into the fire. I've only sent a squad of soldiers to bring a few elderly Wolvertines to the theater. The copper killers can practice their marksmanship on them. I think that ought to provide the trio down there with an additional incentive. Gornap grinned. Yes, he exclaimed. We kill some Tingle-Whoops, and the Tingle-Whoops kill each other. Exactly, your majesty, Frithar said with a bow. A brilliant idea of yours, as usual. We persuade the Wolvertines to kill each other by killing a few ourselves. The theater guard. Ribble had already deduced from the rhythmical clank and jingle of armor that a sizable body of soldiers was approaching the prison. Someone knocked on the door. Who is it? Ribble barked. Theater guard, came in crisp reply. We've come to recruit some Wolvertines for the theater of death. 1 moment, said Ribble. He opened the door. Standing outside were a dozen heavily armed soldiers. It was hard to tell exactly what they were under their armor. Come in, said Ribble. The soldiers entered the prison. What's that bloodstain doing on the floor? The sergeant demanded. The Wolverine got up and he had to kill him. Good, said the sergeant. Then, hey, why aren't you in uniform? Mine's covered in blood, Ribble said grimly. Wolverine blood. We're bolting. How many prisoners do you need? 6 as targets for the copper killers. Great, Ribble laughed. All right, help yourselves. He unbolted the door to the main hall. The sergeant stood aside and the soldiers marched in. Halt, shouted the sergeant. Stand to attention. The soldiers stiffened. Their eyes took a while to get used to the dim light. The sergeant, too, had to blink several times before he made out what awaited him beyond the door. Dozens of Wolvertines were drawn up in a semicircle, and they made a resolute impression. They were on his elderly side, but most were armed. One of them, a massive specimen with a notch in his skull, stepped forward and said, You'd better surrender. Ribble held his spear to the sergeant's throat. Zorda was a fool, but he knew he had no hope against Rumo on his own. Zorilla was out for the count. And who knew when Kromek would stop barking? Rumo leant across the table with his sword point at Zorda's throat. Listen carefully, he said. You're now going to tell me, and make it short and snappy, exactly how the Wolvertines are held prisoner. You won't lie or hold back any important details, and you won't make any false moves, either now or later. If you do all those things, you may escape with your life. Fire away. The cells had 2 doors, said Zorda. One in front leading up to a gallery inside the theater, and one behind which leads to the secret stairs. The chains in the cells have to be unlocked separately. Good, now you're going to help me open the doors to the stairs and unchain the prisoners. You don't have a hope. The theater is guarded by the copper killers. You can either help me or die. Which do you prefer? Hard to say, said Zorda. It'll probably amount to the same thing. The Kingdom of Death. This was the cold grey realm of death, a desolate region devoid of life. Why had he got involved in such a lunatic scheme? Professor Khalifi, Smart called. Hello? No reply, of course not. The professor had bowed out a long time ago. The rest had been so easy thanks to Calibri's assistance, traveling through his brain to the chamber containing the non-existent Teeny's micro-machines, activating the subcutaneous submarine with the aid of its contentment servo mechanism, steering it through the idiosprites into Calibri's bloodstream, and getting from there into Ralla's bloodstream, telepathically guided by the professor himself, who knew his own body better than any anatomist.
In accordance with Calibri's instructions, the submarine had glided silently along veins and arteries, agile as a trout until it reached the spot where it connected his circulation to Ella's by means of some sterile tubing. As soon as Smite passed through this artificial cannula and into Ella's body, however, communication abruptly ceased. The lightning inside the vessel faded to a dull glow, and the electrical hum died away. Smite could still see through the translucent membrane, but all that met his eyes outside was a strange, lifeless world. He was dependent on himself alone. The submarine's electric motor stopped, leaving it adrift in the slowly cooling, coagulating plasma of a vein whose floor was strewn with dead corpuscles and other microorganisms. It resembled a battlefield after a crushing defeat. Being inside Ella's dead body was entirely different from visiting Calibri's spring. This was no realm of ideas equipped with floating information silos. There were no cubes or parallelepipeds. No luminous trapezoids or pyramids, no orderly thoroughfares. Everything here was knotted and entangled in wildly proliferating junk of vegetation. How would he ever find his way around? His brain was nearly burst. Calibri had pumped it so full of information, but anatomy was one of his fields. Smite could tell a urethra from a capillary, a ganglion from an adipose cell. He was surrounded by a mass of nodules and protuberances, convolutions and excrescences. So what was wrong with her was her liver. Was he in front of her, a foot, or in her brain? The only reason for not becoming hysterical, given his present predicament, was that it wouldn't have done any good, or would it? "Help!" he yelled. "Please help! Help!" replied a nasal, high-pitched voice. "Please help! Please help!" Smite, who hadn't really expected an answer, gave a start. Had the voice come from outside or from here inside the boat? "Hello," he called. "I'm here, Professor Calibri." "Are you called Calibri? Is that your name?" "Calibri? No, my name is Smite Eye." "Smite Eye? Your name is Smite Eye?" "Smite. My name is Smite." "His name is Smite." "Smite, Smite, Smite, Smite." It was strange. The voices all sounded alike, and they seemed to belong to 3 different people. "What are you doing on board our submarine, Smite?" "Yes, Smite. What's your excuse? Speak up, Smite." "But is this your submarine?" asked Smite. "It most certainly is. You mean you're the non-existent teenies? The what?" "The who? The what?" "There are non-existent teenies. That's the name you go by, or rather that's what the Professor Calibri, your discoverer, calls you, and you call us the non-existent teenies?" "Yes, you don't say. What check? Sorry, what cheek? Why not call us the non-existent unmentionables while you're at it?" "I'm sorry, I didn't think up the name. You probably don't think on principle. For instance, you didn't think twice about insulting us." "Hey, steady on, all right. Tell me your real name." "We can't. Impossible. Too risky." "Oh, why?" "We do have a name, but it isn't a name by your limited standards. You wouldn't understand our name. It's too complicated. Your brain couldn't handle it. The mere sound of our name would drive you insane. It's a number, actually. From your point of view, it's an inconceivable number." "An inconceivably big number, you mean?" "No, an inconceivably small number. Insanely small. So small that time goes backwards when one utters it. How would it be if I didn't address you by name and we simply went on talking like this? That would be impolite. That form. You like to make things easy for yourself, eh, Smite? Didn't think up a name yourselves, darn it all. I'd like to be called Smite. And I'd like to be called Smite Smite. Oh, I'd like to be called Smite Smite Smite. And you want to be called Smite 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 and Smite 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 Smite? That'd be too confusing. Can't you think of anything better? No, we've got no imagination. No? No. We've got over our imagination an inconceivable time ago. An inconceivably long or inconceivably short time ago. Are you making fun of us, Mike? Hey, don't you have a sense of humor? No, we got over our sense of humor as well. We seem to have got over a lot of things. Certainly we have. We've got over time and space, pain and death, and war and taxes. And last but not least, size. Any kind of size. Really? So what's left? Numbers. Only numbers are eternal. So why not call yourself by numbers? How about 1, 2, and 3? Those aren't numbers, they're words. Heavens alive, they call yourselves whatever you like. You're a pretty fussy bunch. You still haven't answered our question. What are you doing in our submarine? Well, I've come to start a dead heart beating again. Oh, that is not all. Aren't you biting off a bit more than you can chew? Professor Calibri says this Calibri person is beginning to get on my nerves and I don't even know him. First, he calls us teenies. Non-existent teenies. Then he steals our submarine, and now he wants to perform miracles. Calibri says there aren't any miracles, just scientific successes of miraculous proportions. I believe his calculations have told him with the abs that you'll give me a helping hand. That Calibri. Fancy claiming that we'd help someone who's pinched our submarine to perform a miracle, even though there aren't any miracles. Give us one good reason why we should help you. Just one. Well, it's an affair of the heart, so to speak. Cardiac surgery always is. No, it's a question of love, I mean. Oh, no, not that. We got over love, too, a long time ago. Did you know that love consists of a series of numbers, which, when subtracted from itself, adds up to 0? Any series of numbers would. Yes, isn't it shocking? If you think about it for long enough, stop badgering him. What sort of love are you talking about? Now, don't go getting sentimental. We've put all that behind us. We've got over our sentimentality. I was only asking. Facts are what I'm after. Cold, hard, unadored facts. It's the sort of love that transcends death. Really? How romantic? Tell me more, I mean. Give me some more cold, hard, unadored facts. It's a love so pure and great that the both of the lovers have more than once defied death as an attempt to be reunited, but now it seems that death has finally defeated them. That's all interesting, I mean. Interesting in a cold, hard, unadored way. Give us some more facts. Yes, more. More. Riftar feels unwell. Bornab squealed with delight as the gates into the arena opened. Seizing a cushion, he clasped it to his chest. He was looking forward to pulling it to pieces during the forthcoming bloodbath and tossing the feathers around. How many Tinker Wolves will you let the Repexpelic kill? He asked Riftar. I'm giving the Copper Killers half a dozen Wolpertings to kill, Riftar replied. Only Zid? Bornab sounded disappointed. How sanctimonious of you. Why not a Zodin? I've told the Copper Killers to kill them slowly, using as many crossbow bolts as possible. It will look as if several dozen are dying. Bornab grunted and redirected his attention to events in the arena. Riftar had the situation under control again. From now on, the Wolpertings would exterminate themselves instead of wiping out the theater's precious stock of gladiators. This was intended to signal the beginning of the end of their proud race. Wolpertings came and went, but the theater and hell would go on forever. All these distractions notwithstanding, however, Riftar hadn't managed to get rid of himself of the malaise that had overcome him at the sight of the female Wolperting's corpse inside the metal maiden. The sensation was so persistent that he kept shaking himself in an attempt to throw it off. Could it be influenza? Never having been ill in his life, he didn't know what influenza felt like. What nonsense. How could the king's chief advisor, who was also in charge of Hell's public health system, be ill? Riftar gave himself another shake and concentrated on the fight below. Plenty of fighting. That wasn't bad, said Ushan, but we'll have to try even harder. Having just launched some fierce attacks, the trio were now confronting each other in the middle of the arena, breathing heavily. Even harder? Panted Earth. I've done my best to kill you, Ushan. Honestly, you've nothing left to reproach me for. No, I haven't, said Ushan. But this is when things get really serious. I'd like for the two of you to do something for me. Like what? The Roll asked out of breath. Go on fighting? No, you must kill me. What? You must kill me. They'll be herding those oldsters into the arena at any moment. Then it'll be too late and many will die. You must kill me now at once. It's our friend's only hope. They'll be herded in here, come what may, said Rolf. We should strike right away. The three of us must scale the wall to the royal box. The Copper Killers will turn us into good cushions before we got there, said Ushan. Kill me, I beg you, he pleaded. Quick, or it'll be too late. It's already too late, said Urs, pointing to one of the gates with his sword. Some Wolpertings were entering the arena, but they weren't frail or elderly, nor were there only 6 of them. They were young, strong, and armed to the teeth, and scores of them were streaming through the gates. Rolf caught sight of his friends Bella of Betaville, Roscoe of the Dunes, and Olek of the Red Forest. Earth spotted the triplets from his lodgings and knew Sean many of his pupils from fencing school. The last to enter the arena was Rumo. A murmur ran through the auditorium. Hellions of homunculi sprang to their feet. Riftar stared motionless at the crowd. Bornab screamed and the Copper Killers reached for their crossbows. Rumo ran out in the middle of the arena where Rolf, Ushan, and Urs were still standing. Astonished by the newcomer's sudden appearance, Rumo exclaimed, "Where have you been all this time? I had things to do." "Did you release them all?" asked Dushan. "I had some help," Rumo replied. "Where's Rala?" Rolf demanded. "Why isn't she here?" "Rala is dead." "Truly?" "She was tortured to death by someone called General TikTok. I hoped I'd find him here." "Do you know someone by that name?"
Rolf burst into tears. The others shook their heads mutely. "Where is she?" asked Rolf. "Two friends of mine are guarding her body. We'll go and get her when we're finished here. Now we must fight." "Yes," said Ushan Duluka. "Now we must fight." Rumo held his sword in the air to give Grindel and Dandelion a panoramic view of the theater. The soldiers among the audience had left their seats and were streaming towards the exits on their way to the arena. "Good heavens," said Dandelion. Okay, my net just died. So I have to end the stream while it charges. I'm so sorry.